Tip number 1, get used to the quick build menu. It's by far the easiest way to construct any structure, produce any unit, or upgrade any research your faction currently has access to. It'll automatically select a nearby worker to construct the building you're intending on building. In this case, maybe you want a barracks and a habitat. It will automatically select any idle worker first, and then, if you believe in maximum efficiency instead of mandated work breaks, it'll select one of the workers from Luminite, and then send it right back afterwards without ever having to manually select that worker individually, unlike, say, StarCraft 2. Now there are little quirks with each faction. Like with Vanguard, you can build with multiple workers in order to increase the speed with diminishing returns, kind of like Age of Empires over time. Infernals, their imps become the building, so rallying back to minerals is optimistic. And Celestials have copyright-free power fields known as cascade fields, which is all they require in order to construct. But that leads us right into tip 1.1, which is if you want more faction-specific tips instead of generalized ones like in this guide, you should like and subscribe, especially to the second channel, Winter Gaming TV, where most of the Stormgate content is going to end up, as this is still WinterStarcraft and will intend on being that for the foreseeable future. But I want to get these basic tips out there, and that leads us right into tip 2 on similar lines is quick building units. It is capable of producing any unit that your faction is able to construct. In this case, for Vanguard, the W key gives you basic units, and most importantly, your workers. You can rally them just right-clicking on any resource on the map, and all your command posts will be rallied there with that little yellow key. And anything else, simply right-click Not Resources, and it will rally the rest of your army units there. Now, you got to be a little careful. If you want to build units from a specific location, you're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way with control groups or just manually selecting. But especially in the late game, when you have a ridiculous amount of resources or a huge amount of production, it definitely makes it easier than trying to track down where all your barracks are out on the map. And I recommend, especially for worker production, getting used to using the quick build menu as opposed to relying entirely on those control groups. It definitely makes things easier. Tip 3 is upgrades. Both quickly building them and some of the differences and quirks, especially compared to games like StarCraft 2. First, the quick build menu has you covered here. If you have the prerequisite buildings, the biokinetics lab, the machine lab, the scrapyard for Vanguard, and other equivalent ones for the other factions, you can build any of those upgrades. R has your basic infantry and building upgrades, as well as the advanced upgrades for your mech units, your higher tech stuff. Now, an important thing to note is first, there are no basic upgrades. There's no +1 attack or +1 defense sort of upgrades available. Pretty much all the upgrades have unit functionality or abilities tied into it. For example, the Lancer has kinetic redirection, which allows them to attack and move faster the more they're attacked. So they're very good against basic units that attack quickly, like Gaunts or Argents from the Celestials, or just, other Vanguard units. They also have Mitigative Guard, which is a sort of hardened shield sort of ability. Important to note, especially if you're looking at the quick build, many of the more advanced upgrades are hidden or require a prerequisite upgrade at a lower tech. So consult your local tech tree or advanced unit guide on certain YouTube channels to learn more about which upgrades are behind what, or just, testing out yourself. But if you're wondering where a certain upgrade is, it may require one of those basic unit upgrades first. And the upgrades vary from increasing energy regeneration to reducing damage to giving, in some cases, entirely new sorts of abilities or functionality. And far too many to go over here. But just to let you know, every faction has some of those. Tip 4 is about hotkeys. Those keyboard fingering skills that set apart the best from the rest of nerds are very apparent in Stormgate, but they're relatively intuitive, as the majority of things are based on the grid system. From the quick build menu we've already talked about, to units themselves, from the A key for attack move to the G key for patrol, D for hold position. These are all by default, and I don't really feel a need to change them myself. But your mileage may vary. The Select All Army hotkey starts out on the spacebar, but there are a couple recommendations I would certainly make for those of you especially coming from StarCraft 2. First off, is the menu is by default the escape key. I've switched it to F10N and then gone on over to the command card and made the cancel key escape, because that way it avoids me trying to cancel my bases and get some of the money back. instead of opening up the menu and rage quitting the game because it's not that by default. You also have camera locations, which you can adjust to your liking. The idle worker key, I've switched that to F1, once again emulating StarCraft 2. And a whole suite of other options from the top bar, Control Q, WE, you still got the grid system there. But in general, relatively intuitive. I don't feel the need to change too many of the hotkeys, but you do have the option there, if so inclined. Tip 5 is all about creep camps. No, not the Zerg version, but instead the objectives scattered throughout all of Stormgate's maps, with various benefits that can have a pretty huge impact, even into the late game. So, very simply, to get a creep camp, you kill the monsters, and claim the control point. Once you claim that control point, you get the benefit. Also, some of the monsters will give you resources when you kill them. Once you claim that control point, you have access to the camp, and you currently get all the benefits. The Vision Tower gives you vision. The Luminite Tower, for example, gives you resources over time. The Healing Camp heals your units. You've also got the Energy Tower, the Speed Camp, rounding things out. So, depending on the camp, you get different benefits, and usually there are different monsters controlling it. Now, another key point is, just because you control it or claimed it, doesn't mean you can keep it. The enemy can contest the camp as well, up until it respawns, which I believe is around 4 minutes, something like that. And every time the camp respawns, it levels up, which makes the monsters have more HP and be significantly more dangerous, though generally it doesn't scale nearly as fast as the size and strength of your army, but it does make it a little harder to claim camps in the later game. Also, many of the camps get an added benefit when you kill the higher level camp, both in resource drops and their effectiveness. Though, once again, it's not a huge difference from 1 to 5. So, the creep camps in general are significant objectives out of the map, and you should probably try to grab as many as possible without going too far out of your way. And maybe, especially in the late game, in order to get extra resources, those Luminite and Therium camps become very valuable as well, especially when things are starting to get close to mining out. Speaking of mining, tip 6 is about Luminite. The space gold that serves as a basic resource that required to build effectively everything in Stormgate is relatively easy to acquire, as you start out mining it with several workers, and usually want to continue building them and acquiring as much as possible through the end of the game. Now, to start things off, Luminite mines have 4 potential mining locations. That is determined by the location of your base, the command post. Celestials, we're just going to put off to the side here because they aren't really included in this conversation with their fancy celestial space magic. But for Vanguard and Infernals, up until 12 workers, you will continue gathering more and more from that Luminite mine. Past 12 workers, though, your workers will simply be sitting around and waiting for everyone else. I mean, typical construction project, but you do not get any sort of benefit from putting more than 12 workers on a Luminite mine. They're just kind of sitting there idle. This is still true even if you have multiple command posts or multiple bases nearby, as they are locked into 4 zones or nodes, or some might even call them Luminite patches when building. So generally, a maximum of 12 workers is the rule at as many bases as you can afford and defend. Somewhat more complicated, but also more interesting, is Therium for tip number 7. The advanced tech resource, which serves a similar purpose to Vespene gas in StarCraft 2, is very different in the way you acquire it and the details around it. First off, you can just send a worker to go mine some Therium. It'll return it to base, or in the case of Vanguard, you've got your gathering structures in the scrapyard, which makes it a little bit less of a travel time. But unlike Luminite, there is no hard limit on how many workers that you can put on a Therium patch. If you are so inclined, you can put 45 workers or even more on a Therium patch, and they will mine it out incredibly quickly, which might sound great and also a very interesting mechanic, and it is. But the details around Therium are important. So I'm going to reach out to my hopefully not small contingent of Factorial fans out there and talk about happy rocks and sad rocks. So Therium propagates over time. If you wait long enough, it enriches. I believe it's 3 to 5 minutes or something like that. It's been changed a lot. I'm sure it'll get changed again. But you can see the glowy green rocks mine much faster than they would if just starting out. And starting out, you have no enriched Therium as the game has not gone on long enough. But if you mine all of the Therium out it will no longer propagate, and you're essentially mined out of the entire location. So you are encouraged, unless maybe you're stealing your opponent's Therium, to not actually mine out the whole location. Otherwise, you're not going to have much of a location at all. You see it popping out there. So enriched Therium mines much faster. It doesn't give you more, but just in being able to return resources faster, gives you more Therium income. So I'm sure the details around this will get changed significantly over time, but generally, the rule is around 4 to 5 workers in most locations will be a sustainable Therium mine. Any more, and you're liable to mine out rather quickly. Any less, and, well, you're practicing sustainable Therium practices, which, big credit to you. Tip 8 is about the rest of the map. The trees, the terrain, the water, of which, honestly, I think looks really good, and general rules around it. So, there are trees all over the map. You can't mine them for wood. You already have space gold. Don't get greedy. But trees can be cut down by workers, opening up attack paths for different mining locations relevantly, or various abilities or units like the Atlas that can attack ground are able to clear out those trees as well. This is relevant both defense and offense, as well as utility. Now, when it comes to the map itself, when it comes to high ground and ramps, there is no benefit, no damage bonus, or sort of damage reduction for being on high ground, though it does block vision if you don't have air units going up the ramp, similar to StarCraft 2. As you can see, right up until the top of the ramp, actually. But another interesting quirk is you can build directly on the ramp in order to potentially wall it off. It looks a little janky. I'm not sure if it's going to stay like that, but it actually will physically block you from being able to move past that location. Unlike StarCraft 2, you can build directly on that ramp location. So it's usually a little easier to wall off that spot as well. So make sure to utilize that if you if your neighbors aren't sending diplomatic missions. Tip 9, but it works on my machine. I have an NVIDIA 4080 RTX and an AMD 5950X processor, and this is not just a humble brag about your generous support, but instead, I expect to play most games at a relatively high quality and be able to show them off. And I'll be honest, Stormgate was struggling until I downloaded the newest driver that literally has Stormgate referenced in it from NVIDIA. Now, if you have an AMD card, maybe somebody in the comments can recommend it. But I know it sounds condescending, but download the newest driver if you're having any issues. The game is not perfectly optimized. It doesn't get the FPS I would love it to have at the latest game, but it definitely helped a lot with the stability throughout most, especially 1v1. Now, I didn't notice too much of an FPS or stability gain by changing the actual quality of the graphics from low to ultra. I have it capped at 60 for recording purposes. Got DLSS enabled with DLAA, which I'll be honest, I don't know what that means, but that's the one I found to look the best without changing performance. And now something that's just aesthetics, brightness. The game defaults to 100%, as you might expect, which I think looks okay, but I found lowering that brightness to something significantly lower has a tendency to cast those units in their best light. So that's personal preference. And speaking of mostly personal preference, gameplay settings as well. Now, edge scroll, of course, you want enabled. Status bar display, in this case, health bars for the most part. Smart is damaged health bars, but at this time, it doesn't currently show veterancy for your Vanguard units, which we're not going to go too far into. But I found always health bars for now is my preference, but this is dealer's choice, I think. Obviously, locking mouse to window. I personally prefer the team-colored life bars, as well as the requirements for abilities and all that, so that way you always know why things are not working out. Automated control groups are something I would recommend testing with the AI. It will automatically set certain types of units into, I believe, the 1, 2, and 3 control groups. It's a bit unwieldy. I usually prefer to have a bit more granularity there, but that's up to you, and I think it's worth testing out, and just to get maybe give some feedback on it. And of course, you can change the console scale and the minimap position to the correct side, or the right one. I do hope at some point the minimap can be scaled independently, because I'd probably have that at like double size, and then everything else at half, but we're getting there. And then you have your BuddyBot options. BuddyBot will not quite play for you, but it does a pretty good job of covering your bases. Not at the level that a high-level player would, but it's for co-op and against AI. It is not available in 1v1 matchmaking, just FYI. But I don't think it's a terrible idea to maybe play a few games with it and see what it ends up doing to help you out. And also, it works in co-op, so if you're into that. But right now, those are my recommended settings. And let people know in the comments if you found any tricks or tips along those lines. Tip 10 is kind of an overview of what you can expect for the early access release, the free-to-play release on August 13th. What isn't there yet, what I'm looking forward to, and kind of just a general outlook. As you know, I played StarCraft 2 for 14 years. I've put out over 4,000, I don't know how many thousands of videos, it's thousands, in that time. And right now, Stormgate is the closest thing we have to a successor. It's not there yet, but it's made a lot of progress in the last few years. I think there's a ton of room for improvement, but each iteration of the game has gotten better and better. And I think there is a lot of room for criticism. I think it's important that Frost Giant hears it. There's even like a little Discord icon in the bottom left, Jimmy, that you can click on and head on over to the Discord, where they're very active in responding directly to feedback and criticism. So just saying you don't like something is not as good as saying what you would like to see instead. So I've already provided a lot of that. I hope you guys will as well. So I think it's very important as we go forward to make sure to kind of keep it constructive overall, as we all want the same thing: good games for the fans. And with the Stormgate Early Access, you'll find a lot of games. I'm sure you'll have a strong opinion on whether it's good or otherwise, but you can pick any of the 3 factions or head with random in 1v1. You have access to co-op with 5 different heroes. I'm not sure the exact process for purchasing heroes. I think you can play them up to a certain point, much like SC2. You have your baseline options and then more. And then you have the campaign as well. At least the first iteration of it, or the first few missions. Honestly, I haven't checked that out yet. I'm looking forward to it, but I probably won't be checking it out till release. You also have custom games. You have replays, which you certainly should be checking out. And a link to videos like this one. And, of course, a cosmetic shop, if you're into that as well. So you have kind of your baseline StarCraft 2-esque system here for Stormgate. And in the near future, I believe 2025 on the roadmap, is the map editor. And I'll be honest, that's my biggest disappointment for release, is not having a map editor and custom games. But with the game still in development, I want them to do it right instead of do it fast. So hopefully that is coming along nicely. And then 3v3 multiplayer as well, as not just a team game mode where you jam 1 or 2 or 3 players next to each other like StarCraft 2, but instead a specific mode with separate objectives and gameplay than 1v1, but still competitive multiplayer. So those are coming next year. But for this early access stage starting out, you've got 1v1, campaign, co-op, and custom games. So I'm looking forward to all of those things, probably in that order, actually. We'll have to see. And hopefully you are as well. But thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. Make sure to check out the second channel. Over the first couple weeks of Stormgate, I'm going to be putting out guides for each faction individually. All the little specifics, like you have no idea how to play Celestials. I'll be honest, part of the reason we didn't add that information into this guide is I have no idea either. I don't know what's going on, but it's certainly not Protoss. But there are some very unique aspects to the game I'm looking real forward to exploring, and hopefully you'll do alongside me. So thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Good luck, have fun, and stay chill.